Hey guys, it's Shelby, and today we're going to be talking about two separate issues. The video is going to kind of be a two-parter. We're going to talk about why companies don't want to go zero waste and the best things that I know that you can do to try to convince them to switch over to more sustainable packaging. So this video idea came about the other day when I was in an Asian supermarket, and I started realizing how much packaging there was and how many variants there were to each product, how many products couldn't exist without their plastic packaging. And I just started to think, before plastic was a thing, before single-use disposable, really toxic, horrible, plastic was a thing, how did we get these items? And I started realizing that we didn't. A lot of these items have only existed for the last couple decades, if that. Things like Jell-O in a little plastic cup. A lot of things that are cultural foods that people in America eat, but you couldn't have them because they're actually made in Asia and shipped over here and sold in the Asian market. A lot of the things that I was looking around at the Asian supermarket wouldn't exist without their plastic packaging. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that a lot of businesses, a lot of people's livelihoods, a lot of things like that are based around this plastic packaging. And as much as we don't really want to admit that and think about that, that's reality. Have you ever thought about how many people would be out of a job if someone like Coca-Cola went out of business? If they figured out a way to sell their product without packaging, how would all those people get jobs? From the people who farm the products, to the people who market the products, to the people who sell the products, etc. Everywhere throughout that supply chain, if they didn't exist because of plastic, we wouldn't have jobs for them. Now, that's not to say that we should justify everything that they do and all of these things, but it is something to keep in mind and something that's very interesting when I started thinking about it. All of these products, the 28 brands of granola bar at the store wouldn't exist, and therefore none of that wealth and none of those jobs would exist without that packaging. So easy enough to say just don't buy any of those things, don't buy them, don't support them, and someday hopefully they will stop producing the plastic that they're producing. I don't think that's totally realistic. I think the zero waste movement is important, but I think it is small enough to where never is the whole community of people who consume these products going to say, I'm not going to consume these anymore because of their packaging. I think it's unrealistic. I think what's more realistic for us to talk about is how we could switch over to more biodegradable materials, right? So that if you do purchase a soda and it comes in a plastic bottle, that plastic bottle isn't going to end up sitting in the ocean for millennials. I mean, vast amounts of time. It will break down upon contact with the water within a week or two. Or we start thinking about packaging granola bars in more paper-based packaging instead of plastic or mylar. But I think it's important to realize that the reason these companies don't want to go zero waste is because it's not that easy. Their product would not exist without that waste. Stop and think about it. For example, saying that these people who produce these granola bars should just produce them, not package them, ship them to the grocery store and sell them without packaging, like in a bulk section, would not only require a ton of coordination and participation all throughout that cycle from the people who are creating it, from the people who are shipping it, from the people who are selling it in the store. We would have to rearrange the entire concept of how to sell those things, not accounting for how many of those granola bars would break in the process, etc. So you can see, for example, how there are just a lot of shifts that would have to happen. It's not going to come from the creator's standpoint. Quaker is not going to stop producing their granola bars because of their waste, because it's making them exponential amounts of money because of the lack of awareness for environmental concerns. We can always try to raise the awareness, which is what I do largely on my Instagram and on my YouTube channel and in my daily life. But if we are asking these companies to no longer have packaging at all, I do not think that is realistic, because so many jobs would be lost if we tried that. So switching over to more biodegradable, compostable type of packaging is the way to go. So with that being said, now that we understand why so many of these companies exist for the sole purpose that there is plastic packaging, maybe we can start talking about how to convince them to change their packaging from something that will be used for 5 seconds yet last in the environment forever to something that is more biodegradable. So what are the ways we can convince these companies to do this? Of course, and one of the ways is to boycott them. As I mentioned before, I do not think the boycotts will ever get quite large enough to actually make a difference. Their whole consumer demographic would have to know and be cut in by huge margins for that to make a difference. And new customers for them are coming on the stage every single day. So if we can't hit them in their wallets, which is a great place to start but not a good place to end, we need to talk about other things we can do. So it comes down to how to get their attention, and there are a few ways to do that. For example, Barilla. They are one of the only pasta companies in my store that come in cardboard packaging instead of like a plastic bag. So I purchased from them. However, they do have that little plastic window on the front. I'm okay with things being sold in cardboard because it's not as toxic to create or dispose of, but if they could stop putting that plastic window in there, that would be great. And I know that multiple people have been doing this recently, but sending that packaging back to Barilla in the mail with a note that says, this plastic window is unnecessary. Imagine if you had to take responsibility for the waste that you are creating into the supply chain, and explaining to them that as a customer, as someone who supports their brand, you would like to see them take out that plastic window. Do you see how that's a shift from just boycotting them? Because if you're boycotting them, you're not going to get their attention. But if you are someone who enjoys their products, who uses their products, and you are a consumer asking for a change, that is much more likely to get them to change their ways. So that's one thing you can do. You can ship packaging back to the brands that send you packaging and say, here's the packaging you gave to me, you need to be responsible for it. That is what it comes down to. These companies create so much waste, and yet we're the ones who have to literally pay to dispose of it. You're the one who pays your garbage bill, not that company. So you can send their packaging back to them with a letter, and you can also just in general send letters to your companies. It might cost you a little bit more, right, to ship back your little plastic windows, or if you wanted to ship back an entire box of something that you bought to say why you don't like it, that's going to cost you a little bit more, but it would cost you dimes on the dollar to send a letter to these companies and let them know how you feel and what you are demanding as a consumer. If we stick with Barilla as an example, it would be as simple as writing them a letter explaining why plastic is horrible, alternatives they could switch to. You know, now there are biodegradable plastics even that they could switch out that window for. I've heard that Barilla is against taking out that plastic window because then the consumer can't see what they're getting. Now, I don't know the mindset that if you're buying spaghetti, you probably know what it looks like, but even if they wanted to stick with that tactic, if they think it's great for marketing, then switch to a biodegradable plastic. And if you are writing them letters demanding these things as a consumer and you're able to get their attention, then maybe we could change their minds. Just other ways to get their attention is doing that same thing but through email. So sending an email explaining the exact same things. That way it's not costing any paper to be sent through the mail, shipping, and it's not costing any money out of your pocket. Another seriously significant tool that I think is a little underutilized, both in terms of the consumer and the company that you're trying to get a hold of, is social media. So creating content around why they should change and taking pictures of how their trash is ending up in the environment and holding them accountable through social media, tagging them on Instagram in your story, tweeting them the issues that you have, tweeting them pictures of look what's about to be on the earth forever for a few seconds of consumption. You know, doing those things and bringing it to their attention in a public way where everyone can see it, that is an even more powerful way to get their attention. So make sure you're following people on Instagram who start these campaigns or who bring these things to your awareness. You can definitely follow me on Instagram, but people like The Story of Stuff, they'll launch campaigns and they'll say, hey, we're targeting this disposable this month. Please go over and tell the companies that are creating these things, these are the alternatives, these are the things we'd like to see as consumers. It's going to take quite a bit of work to get any of these mainstream companies to change their mind, but you can see newer companies that come onto the scene, they often brag about how their packaging is compostable. It is something that consumers are demanding. We just have to be more vocal about it. You know, for example, there are some companies I love to support because of their product, like vegan meat replacements. I think they're so important because the sustainability around meat and meat consumption is so huge. The water footprint, the land footprint, the environmental impacts of that are so significant that I want people to stop eating beef and switch over to the meatless option. But those things often do come in packaging, plastic packaging. Now meat does too, so really the switch there is still a lot more sustainable, but if someone is going to be discouraged to switching to a vegan alternative because of the packaging, I think we're losing a lot of people there, and I don't think that's the most effective thing to do. But instead, get Boga's attention, get Garden of Life's attention, get Gardene's attention, get these companies' attention to say, hey, I am the consumer of your product, I support your brand, I think what you're doing is amazing, but could you please switch to something more sustainable than single-use plastic? So my goal with this video is just to put things into perspective a little bit more, understanding why these companies are pretty resistant to switching over to something like zero waste, why they produce so much waste, and how our economy is kind of based on this packaging. I don't say all of that to excuse the packaging, I just think it's very important before we go railing against all these companies and saying boycott them altogether, to acknowledge that the very fabric of our society is based a lot on it. And if we really want to make a change, we can't come at it from the most extreme version and then demand they come down here. There's got to be some sort of in between the plastic bottle and the completely never supporting that brand again. There's got to be something here that's going to help people switch over. Definitely let me know if you liked this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. I'm definitely really excited to hear your feedback. Like I said, make sure you're following me on Instagram, and remember, until next time, create the peace.